welcome back. This will be the last of our weekly videos. So what I want to do today is not just review what we did last week, but what we've done over the course of the past 7 weeks and what we're going to be doing this final week in this 8-week session. Over these past 7 weeks, we started with really the lower levels of Bloom's taxonomy. We started with developing a base of knowledge. And that started with thinking about theories of teaching. We focused on constructivism, a little bit on behaviorism. We thought about how we might present things, whether it was through an inductive or a deductive approach to our teaching. We moved on to think about theories of learning, particularly how memory works, System 1 and System 2. And we thought about the kinds of things that motivate our students, things that get in the way of their motivation, things that may be preventing us from connecting with our students, things like the gap of minds. And we tried to think through how we might imagine where our students are, because for many of us it's been a long time since we were in that position where our students are. And we need to be able to imagine that position so that we can present material and guide them in ways that will best scaffold their journey towards the kind of mastery that we want our students to have. So those first 2 units were building a base of knowledge and helping us to think in a more theoretical way about what we do. On that, we started to put things into practice. We talked about how we build rapport. What do we do early in a course to build relationships with our students, to help them understand what's expected of them and what they can expect of us? How do we create an open environment that welcomes the different positions within appropriate parameters that our students may be coming from, and the different skills that they have, the different ways of learning that they may respond to best. And so we were thinking about universal design for learning, and how do we make material accessible to our students. On top of that, we thought about how do we organize a lesson. We talked about small teaching as one method of organization. We talked about storytelling as another tool, another method of organization. We then moved towards active learning. How do we get our students involved? If we are committed to a constructivist approach to teaching, how do we give our students hands-on experience? How do we make them a part of their own learning process? And we spent a week on that. On top of that, we thought about how we design an assignment. How do we write up a prompt for an assignment? Using backwards design and we thought about that for putting together our individual lessons. We thought about it with designing assignments and with syllabi. We're always thinking about what are our learning goals? How will we know when we've achieved those goals? And from there, what are the activities that we're going to need to help the students practice the kinds of actions, the kind of learning, the kind of techniques, skills that they'll need to demonstrate their mastery. So, learning goals, assessments, series of activities that will get us and our students to those goals. So we thought about writing an assignment and how can that be done through backwards design. And the same goes for syllabi. Finally, we thought about assessment, and this is what we did this last week. Talking both about formative and summative assessments. As many of you pointed out, many of our students are very keenly aware of those summative assessments. They have been primed to think about their grades or their scores on major assignments, major tests. etc. And I appreciate those of you who are thinking through how do we get them to translate that attention to a grade, to a score, into concern with what have I learned? How will I build on what I've learned so far? How can this score, this grade, be a stepping stone in a broader project of education? Along with that attention to assessments for our students, we considered how we ourselves get feedback. What are we looking for in our students? What are we asking of our students that will help us understand whether we're getting through, whether we're moving too fast or too slow, whether we need to shift the kinds of activities that we're doing to better adapt to the students that we have. But overall, what we've been thinking about, and hopefully this has been a kind of through line for the whole class, we've been thinking about how do we become reflective practitioners? How do we bring to our attention, evaluate, and then build upon what we see ourselves doing as teachers? Of course, in a very literal way, you got to observe, assess, and build upon what you see yourself doing in the micro teaches that we did. But hopefully that has become a process that you engage in through all of these activities. Over these past 7 weeks, I hope that for some of you who are new to teaching, you have found a reservoir of approaches, of techniques, of questions that you can turn to as you start to build your teaching career. For many of you who are well along in your teaching career, I hope that this has been an opportunity for you to review, that it's giving you a chance to just think conscientiously about what you're doing so that you can be refreshed in your thinking about teaching. For this final week, what we're up to is putting together largely our teaching portfolio. We do want to step back and think about our disciplines. What does my discipline teach? How do I articulate what my discipline, what my field teaches? I take that for granted. Been doing it for a long time, therefore I just know what my field does. But my students may not be in the know in the same way that I am. So how am I going to explain to my students why they should care about what I'm teaching? What is it that my discipline offers? So we're thinking about how we articulate those big questions about our discipline. We're thinking about how teachers within our discipline display what they do as teachers. And that's all building to our teaching portfolio. This is the compilation of your story as a teacher. Who you are as a teacher, what are some of the concrete activities that you engage in, what does a syllabus look like, what does a lesson plan look like, what are the other pieces of evidence that you can put together that will demonstrate to a student or a colleague, hiring committee, who you are as a teacher. That's the big effort here in Module 8. And so you'll have 2 assignments. The first is the final revision of your teaching philosophy. You did a very rough version in Module 1. We came back and you did 2 drafts in Module 7. You should now have in hand the peer feedback on what you did in Module 7, and you're revising it one last time. On top of that teaching philosophy, then you're putting together the teaching portfolio. And you'll notice that the first thing in the teaching portfolio is the teaching philosophy. You don't need to do a separate version of that teaching philosophy for the portfolio. Just make it a part, whatever you did in the first assignment for the module, make that the beginning of your larger portfolio. Within the portfolio, there are required elements that you need to have. So these are the required elements. You need the final version of your teaching philosophy. You need a lesson plan. Think about how we talked about organizing a lesson that engages some kind of active learning technique. So in some ways, it's mainly what you did in Module 5, but make sure it has the structure, it has some of the organization that we've talked about in Module 4. You need an activity that encourages increased engagement and comprehension. This would be something like the second or third active learning technique that you were doing in Module 5. You need an assignment prompt. This is what we did in Module 6. And you need that modified or original syllabus that you also did in Module 6. On top of that, you can add other things. But those are the 5 required elements. With these elements, part of a teaching portfolio is the way that you organize it and the way that you orient your audience to the various elements that you've included. So I highly recommend not only that you have a title for each of those sections, but that you also have brief head notes in which you explain what you think that assignment prompt, for instance, demonstrates to your reader about your teaching practices. So make sure you have the 5 required elements, have titles and short head notes for all of your elements so that we understand what they're conveying about your teaching, and then choose to add anything else that you think will help to further round out what it's like to be taught by you and what's important to you as a teacher. We have put a page limit on it, about 12 pages or 6,000 words. Now, depending on how you format things, 6,000 words can be more or less than 12 pages. I realize that that's a bit of an arbitrary number. That's really so that the tutors can move through that material in a timely fashion. So you will have to be somewhat selective, especially if you have a long teaching career and have a lot of materials that you might want to share. So think of this as the condensed version. But hopefully what you end up with is a document that helps you to see, I have thought through all of these elements of my teaching. I have thought through what I want to do on a daily, on a weekly, on a course-wide level to shepherd my students through the learning process. I'm really looking forward to being with you this last week on the forums. For those of you who have not yet done so, if you have throughout the course added to the forums a link of some sort, a reference, a source, please add that to the Google Doc so that we all have access to that. And I wish you the best of luck as you continue, and the best of thoughtfulness, perhaps, I should say, as you continue in your teaching careers or as you embark upon your teaching careers, as some of you are doing. Good luck and have a great week.